Good morning, everyone. August the 18th, Sunday morning, and I'm back from a brief vacation, and we have Daniel chapter 11 that we are studying today. Daniel 11 is actually, by many commentary writers, described as the most detailed prophecy in Scripture, and we'll see why in just a moment. But before we do that, we have our opening prayer using Psalm 111. It's on page 586 in the front part of the Psalter. I'll read the introduction. It says, "The church sings Psalm 111 in services where Christians marvel at God's gracious salvation. Paired with Psalm 112, it is a short acrostic. Acrostic is the Hebrew ABC, right? The letters of each verse start with subsequent letters of the Hebrew alphabet. So it's a short acrostic and introduces a section that concludes with the long acrostic, Psalm 119. Martin Luther said, Psalm 111 is a psalm of thanksgiving. We learn here to praise and thank God in a fine, short song for all of his mercies, especially his righteousness, his covenant, his trustworthy word, peace and justice, help, and all kinds of grace." So I'll go ahead and read the first line, actually the lines that aren't indented, which means I get to read an extra line to start. You can respond with the indented line or lines in Psalm 111. Praise the Lord. I will extol the Lord with all my heart. In the council of the upright and in the assembly. Great are the works of the Lord. They are pondered by all who delight in them. Glorious and majestic are his deeds, and his righteousness endures forever. He has caused his wonders to be remembered. The Lord is gracious and compassionate. He provides food for those who fear him. He remembers his covenant forever. He has shown his people the power of his works, giving them the lands of other nations. The works of his hands are faithful and just. All his precepts are trustworthy. They are established forever and ever, enacted in faithfulness and uprightness. He provided redemption for his people. He ordained his covenant forever. Holy and awesome is his name. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All who follow his precepts have good understanding. To him belongs eternal praise. And we pray. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, we praise you for your mighty deeds, your power and wisdom. Father, your power and wisdom, Father, created the awe-inspiring universe. Your compassion and mercy moved you, Jesus, to enter our flesh and rescue us from our sin. Your searching love, O Holy Spirit, penetrated our hearts and created the miracle of faith. Bless us so that we never forget your saving deeds, but proclaim them to all people. Amen. We have before us Daniel chapter 11, but just quickly looking at Daniel chapter 10, that is basically an introduction to a vision, the last vision of Daniel, that Daniel sees a messenger. But because it's a distressing vision about the problems that will occur to God's people in the time between Daniel's day and the coming of Christ, take a whole chapter to basically strengthen Daniel and prepare him to receive this message and share it. Then put it down in writing and to be shared. If anybody looking at chapter 10 with a question from 2 weeks ago, we discussed how there's the kings of Persia and then Greece are mentioned, but then also the officers there. And it seems like as the messenger is sharing this message with Daniel, he's indicating that the devil is using one of his officers in Persia to try to stop God's plans from happening, and he will have that same thing going on, the devil using demons to try to stop God's plans through the Greek Empire as well. We have the Archangel Michael is speaking with Daniel, but then actually we're not sure if it's Michael speaking. It seems like Michael is talked about here, but this would probably be the angel of the Lord, which is Christ himself serving as a messenger of the word, or the messenger of the word. And they come and talk about strengthening each other. This angel, the angel of the Lord, probably Christ, is strengthened by Michael, but Michael also strengthens him. We see that very likely that is all going on here. I did note that as we have, if you look at the last note, as Daniel chapter 11 concludes, the EHV editors, this version we have here, they support that likely Michael and the speaker are both angels sent from God who help each other. The People's Bible writer, Professor Jeske, he suggests that the angel speaking to Daniel is the Christ. So that's one of those things we'll maybe have to wait till we get to heaven to find out specifically if it was Christ speaking here. It doesn't impact the truthfulness of the message, whichever way it goes, but it leaves us, gives us reason to study it more deeply. But we're not studying it super deep right now. So if anybody has a question on that or a comment, before we get into the vision itself, Daniel is very distressed because of this vision, but now he is ready and ready to hear it. So actually Daniel 11, the first verse is still that messenger, probably the angel of the Lord, from my understanding, concluding his words his preface to the vision. Anybody just want to read that first verse of Daniel 11? Billy, you want to do a nice short one?
In the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to strengthen and protect him. Okay, so in the first year of Darius the Mede, the Medes and the Persians overthrew the Babylonian Empire. This is after Cyrus had allowed God's people, the Jews, to return to Jerusalem. But we have, if Christ is speaking here, he's talking about in that first year of Darius, standing up to strengthen and protect Michael, who was standing against the devil's agents working in Persia. And he's going to move on with as I say in the notes, that the upcoming prophecy foretells events from Daniel's time up until the end of the world. And there'll be a lot of details here. You might catch on to a few of them if you're familiar with the ancient history of the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, might have to be a history major to remember them, Greek Empire and the Roman Empire. But we'll go into quite a bit of that detail. And just remember that this isn't a historical account. This is a true and historic writing, but he's speaking not of history, but of the future. So this vision is looking ahead in time. Again, about 539 to 536 BC. So the Babylonian Empire has fallen. So the messenger reveals future battles here. That's the first title. The first one, very short, is Xerxes of Persia. Just verse 2. Anybody want to read that about Xerxes of Persia?
Now I will tell you the truth. Look, 3 more kings will arise for Persia. Then the 4th one will gain great riches, more than anyone else. As he becomes strong, though through his riches, he will stir everyone up against the kingdom of Greece. Okay,
so Xerxes of Persia. We have Xerxes, the 4th king, because we say 3 kings will come and then a 4th. So these are all following Cyrus or Darius. He had those 2 possible names here. He's the husband of Esther, okay, from that book of the Bible. Xerxes is known in history for leading the huge Persian expansion against Greece. In 480 BC, it failed. The first three kings that are mentioned, Cyrus, Cambyses, and Darius. There was a short-lived usurper that ruled between Cambyses and Darius, but since it was a usurper, not listed as one of the kings. So we have a very specific number of kings here of Persia. Xerxes, definitely the strongest of them. Anybody remember the battle in which the Greeks, one of the battles in which the Greeks stopped the Persian advance into Europe, into Greece, Macedonia? There's an athletic competition named after it. The Battle of Marathon, because after the victory, the Greeks sent a messenger to run 26 miles to tell everybody about the victory. And when you run 26 miles, you're exhausted. I believe this runner, as he returned to his people in Greece, fell over dead after he shared the message. So, I've never run a marathon. I don't think I want to. So any questions about that? Any history buffs or majors want to add anything? Remember, these kingdoms, definitely you can add more, but this goes back to the early chapter of Daniel, where Daniel had where King Nebuchadnezzar had the vision of the statue, right? The golden head, Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, the Babylonian Empire, the silver chest, arms, and torso, the Persian Empire with Cyrus and Xerxes, and then the waist area that was made of that was made of bronze, the Greek Empire, and then the iron and clay, the legs and feet, that was the Roman Empire. So we have these empires outlined, spending a lot of time on the Bronze Empire, which is Alexander the Great, the Greeks now. So let's, paragraph verses 3 and 4 about Alexander the Great. You've heard of him in history, I assume. Rosie, you mind reading those two verses?
A warrior king will arise. He will rule a great dominion and will do as he pleases. But as he rises, his kingdom will be broken and be divided to the four winds of heaven. But it will not be passed on to his descendants. It will not be ruled with the same ruling power with which he ruled. His kingdom will be uprooted and given to the others besides.
Okay, from what you know and what we've spoken about Alexander the Great and the Greek Empire's expansion, you can even use the notes, but from looking at this prophecy, how does that describe what would happen to Alexander? How did Alexander fulfill these two verses that Rosie read for us? The largest empire, how far did the Greek Empire go? Greece, down to Egypt. I should go Greece, down to Egypt, all the way over to India, right? A huge, and just ran through the nations of the world, expanding his empire. But as it rises, his kingdom will be broken. What happened pretty much as he was just beginning his empire? He died, right? So he died in the middle of his conquest. And then what happened? Actually, 4 of his generals wound up battling to see who would get in control. And they wound up with rather than a monarch, one king, one ruler, they had a tetrarch. 4 rulers of that empire. And so those 4 generals divided up the nation, and we have the 4 winds of the earth, right? 4 directions. We have the 4 generals dividing basically the empire into 4 separate kingdoms. And did not have the same dominating ruling power because Alexander's kingdom was basically given to others. So we see that defeating Persia, Alexander quickly built the kingdom from Greece to India about 330 BC. If you're following an imaginary timeline. At his early death, his empire was broken into 4 parts by his competing generals. So we really have this prophecy of the future, a very quick summary of some major events in history. Maybe, who's ever heard the word Ptolemies before? Raise your hand. You know what the Ptolemies are, okay? Ptolemies are the rulers of Egypt. Okay, one of the generals was named Ptolemy, and then anybody ever hear the word Seleucids before? Okay, it's actually the one of the other generals, kind of the more Middle East, not Egypt, but Arabia and Palestine area that they wound up ruling. So the Ptolemies and the Seleucids basically battled over the area of Jerusalem where the Jews from captivity returned. And so there's a lot of future detail given by Daniel so that God's people know that this misery that they're suffering, kind of in the vice grips, but literally between not literally, figuratively between a rock and a hard place, in the vice grips of two nations, Jerusalem was right in the middle. And they're saying, God, relieve us from our distress. And God's saying, well, this is all part of the plan, what you're going through. So we'll talk about we'll read through verses 5. Let's just take verse 5, one paragraph at a time. Dave, would you mind just reading verse 5?
The king of the south will become strong, but one of his commanders will become stronger than he and rule a dominion greater than his.
Okay, king of the south. So the southernmost portion of the Greek Empire is going to be Egypt and the Ptolemies. And they did impact a lot of the efforts of the Jews in Jerusalem. And that king of the south, Ptolemy of Egypt, and his successors, historically the Ptolemies of Egypt, think of the riches, the gold of Egypt, the Nile River, the agriculture, and all of that there. The Ptolemies wound up being very content to just sit on their riches and enjoy the Nile River and the fruits of the Nile River. They didn't have a whole lot of gumption and get up and go. They weren't very aggressive in expanding. All right, so if you're content and just happy to hold your riches, oftentimes someone will wind up taking it away. So he does have that. The Ptolemy of Egypt did rule for a while, but one of his commanders actually overthrew, one of the commanders of Egypt overthrew the king. So again, if you want to take more time on the history, slow me down. If you think I'm going too slow, say, Pastor, speed it up.
Speed it up.
Okay, 6 through 6, verse 6, Mark, go ahead.
6, okay. After some years, they will make an alliance. The daughter of the king of the south will come to the king of the north and make a fair agreement. However, she will not keep the strength of her arm, and he in his arm will not endure. She will be given up. She and those who brought her, the one who fathered her, and the one who strengthened her during these times.
Okay, so I'm just going to read the notes beside that here. The king of the south and the king of the north. King of the north would be Syria, right? The Seleucids is the name there. Jews were caught in the middle between Egypt and Syria. The king of the south is Ptolemy of Egypt and all of his successors, happy to sit in rich Egypt and count the money and their riches from the Nile River. King of the north, Seleucus, gained power in Syria by ambition after being under Ptolemy. So he's the successor who ruled a dominion greater than Ptolemy. All right. Very interesting note of some specifics in verse 6. All right, the specific kings in verse 6, the one who is a branch from her root will rise in his place, that Ptolemy II and Antiochus II. Ptolemy gave his daughter Bernice to Antiochus, misspelled, for political alliance. So those two kings, right, that are mentioned there, giving his, making that fair agreement through marriage. But Antiochus divorced her, remarried someone named Laodice, and then Laodice poisoned Antiochus, killed Bernice, and she installed her own son as Seleucus II. So a lot of intrigue going on there in verse 6, right? She's not keeping the strength of her promise there in verse 6. He and his arm, the word arm could also be translated seed, so descendants, right? He and his descendants don't endure, it's given up. And we have that political infighting going on in that empire of Egypt, okay? Questions on that? If not, we'll keep it rolling along. Kathy, would you mind reading verses 7 to 9?
But one who is a branch from her root will arise in his place. He will come against the army and come into the fortress of the king of the north. He will make war with them and win. He will also take their gods captive to Egypt with their cast images and with their valuable silver and gold vessels. For some years he will leave the king of the north alone. But the king of the north will come into the kingdom of the king of the south. Then he will return into his own land. Okay, so a branch from her root here in verse 7. This is Bernice's brother, Ptolemy III, who warred against Seleucus II, right there in verse 7, coming against the army of the fortress of the king of the north. That war back and forth, and the south won, Egypt won. He carried off captive to Egypt the gods, the gold, the plunder from Syria, then left Syria alone for a while, but then Syria tried to come back against Egypt. So see, this is bad. So the whole point, back and forth here, battle. And again, remember, this is all going on in the homeland of the Jews. It's not kind of like if Corpus Christi went to battle against Monterrey, and we in the valley would be right in the area, would be going back and forth. Okay.
I'm just wondering, what's the purpose of studying all this historical stuff? There's going to be some finale, right, at the end, or
what?
Should be
Remember, the finale we're leading up to is that the Jews have returned to Jerusalem, and this back and forth of battle is going on over the territory of Jerusalem. And the finale, the grand finale, I'm glad you asked. Don't forget, Christ is coming. And where is he going to be born? Bethlehem. Where is he going to suffer and die and rise? Jerusalem. And if the Israelites are overthrown by Seleucus or by or by Ptolemy or by Antiochus, if the Jews are wiped off the face of the earth like it looked like it was going to happen as this vice grips of battle happened right on top of Jerusalem, well, then it's all for naught, right? God's plan's up in smoke. But God says, this battle going on right on top of you in this time period between the end of the Old Testament and the coming of Christ, this is all prophesied. And the details, very much needed, because you have God's message in the Old Testament, the last prophet, about 400 BC. That means between the last book of the Bible, Malachi, and the coming of Christ, 400 years of silence. God doesn't have any of his word coming. Okay? When's Christ coming? Is he coming at all? You have to look at prophecies like this, and they could look at the details as they were happening from Daniel to say, all right, yeah, Janice, it looks like you're about to, okay.
Just listening.
All right, so okay, so that explained where we're leading up to with a lot of this detail.
It was basically context.
This is context for the coming of Christ. And if you're living in Jerusalem in the middle of this, yeah, the context is very important to know. God actually prophesied this is going to happen this way. You can see that he's still in control. Very similar to how we can read the book of Revelation. What's the context of the day we're living in today? There's false teachers coming into the church. God's word is the defense, right? There's powerful governments trying to quiet the church. The church can try to gain power and political influence. That's happening as well, rather than just proclaiming the word. And both of those are dangers that can drive people away from the Savior Jesus. But God says that's going to keep on happening. In the end, I win. Right? Revelation, in the end, God wins and his team wins. In the Old Testament here with Daniel, At the end of the silent period, God wins, Christ comes. God's people win because the Savior comes. All right. Let's keep moving then, unless you want to get more into specifics. Mark Probst, would you mind? I think we got through verse 9, so if you take verse 10 and following, you got a difficult one, you got to turn the page almost at the end of your paragraph.
His sons will stir themselves up and will gather a huge force of many armies, which will keep coming like an overflowing flood. They will stir themselves up again as far as his fortress. The king of the south will be enraged. He will go out and fight with the king of the north. The king of the north will raise up a great army, but the army will be handed over to the king of the south. When the king of the north's army is swept away, and the king of the south becomes arrogant, he will cause tens of thousands to fall. He will not win.
Okay, so again, this king of the south, the huge force, his sons, we're talking about the king of the north now, the Seleucids here, Seleucus III and Antiochus III, they gather a huge army to go against Egypt, that battle. And they keep coming like an overflowing flood. They kept fighting and fighting Egypt. Egypt enraged, he was content, but the Seleucids woke up a sleeping dog, and so Egypt fights back. And they kind of go back and forth, both gathering large armies. The king of the south sweeps away the king of the north's army. Egypt defeats Syria, but he doesn't win, even though he defeats the enemies soundly. And so we have that. If you turn that first, see that first note at the top of that next page, the note in verse 12. Ptolemy IV invicted a crushing defeat on Antiochus III, and there's a battle of Raphia in 217 BC. Very much detailed of, to have a prophetic thing. And remember, now we're getting 217 BC. This is 100 years after, more than 100 years after Daniel gave his prophecy. Now, Mark, getting to your question about what's this all have to do with Jerusalem, what's the main point? It gets worse than just being caught in the vice grips. Antiochus the Great is basically does abominable things, and not abominable snowmen, but abominations of religious variety in the Lord's own temple. So a longer paragraph that, let's just take verse by verse. Rosie, would you mind taking just verse 13 so we can kind of pull it apart, take it apart bit by bit?
Okay. The king of the north will again raise an army which will be greater than the first army, and after some years he will keep coming with a great army and many supplies. Okay,
king of the north. This is Syria. Antiochus III is the king there. He renews his attacks. He's going to wind up defeating Egypt, which is the king of the south. So Antiochus III has that great army, many supplies. Billy, would you take verse 14?
In those times, many will rise up against the king of the south. Violent men from your own people will lift themselves up in fulfillment of this vision, but they will fail.
So Syria going against Egypt, and violent men from your own nation. What's it say? There's going to be some Jews that side with Syria. All right, and they will not accomplish their purposes. Christine, you want to read verse 15, please?
The king of the north will come and build siege works and captive a fortified city. The forces of the south will stand, not even its best troops, because they will have no strength to stand.
Okay, so this is the Syria, the king of the north, a crushing defeat against Egypt. Okay, verse 16. Mark Probst, would you read that?
16. The one who comes against him will do as he pleases, and no one will stand in his way. He will stand in the beautiful land, and it will be completely in his power.
The one who comes against him. And a lot of the prepositions and the different things in English are like, who is this talking about? Right? That's kind of the way it is in Hebrew too, with looking to the future. But Antiochus the Great, which is Antiochus the Fourth, is the one who captures the beautiful land. And my notes have it, you can probably guess, talking to Daniel, a Jew, and the beautiful land is a way to describe the promised land, Jerusalem. Antiochus the Fourth, Antiochus the Great, said, I'm ruling in Jerusalem, a very proud man, completely holding the power of Jerusalem. Kathy, would you read verse 17 and just 17?
He will be determined to come with the power of his entire kingdom and to bring a treaty with him, which he will enforce. He will give his daughter to the king of the south in marriage in order to destroy the southern kingdom. But his plan will not succeed or turn out to his advantage.
All right, so Antiochus the Great had success against both Egypt and Greece, but his plans and that marriage and power, they were stopped by Roman intervention, okay? And he had to give up his gains after Antiochus lost in the Battle of Magnesia, about 190 BC. In 187, he was killed while looting a temple. He had to pay a debt to Rome. So all of his plans failed, didn't turn out to his own advantage. He didn't rule with the power that he had hoped. Celia, would you read just verse 18?
He will focus his attack on the coastlands and capture many. However, a commander will put an end to his insolence. Moreover, he will make him pay for his insolence. Okay,
so yeah, Antiochus the Great. Sorry, and I think I said earlier this was Antiochus the Fourth. Antiochus the Great is number 3 here, and he's the one who had such military power, focusing his attacks, capturing many, defeating Egypt, making them pay. Dave Brown, would you read verse 19?
Then the king of the north will turn his face toward the fortresses of his land. He will stumble and fall and not be found.
Okay, so now Seleucus here is imposing taxes. Seleucus the Fourth imposes taxes on the Jews to pay his debt to Rome. He's now having to focus inward on his own people to survive, because Rome is starting to grow in power, and they gotta appease Rome so they're not overrun. Okay, he died from poisoning, maybe even by his own chief tax collector Heliodorus. Even this great, right? Antiochus the Great, with all of his power, couldn't hold on to that power. Janice, would you read verse 20 then?
Then one will arise in his place who will send an oppressive tax collector for the glory of his kingdom. However, in a few days he will be broken, but not in anger or battle. So
apologies, I got ahead. That note goes with that one. The replacement of Antiochus the Great is Seleucus and his tax collector, and that whole issue led up to his own defeat. So really quickly, those details of history, I'm not going to go over them unless you got a specific question in any more detail than we just did verse by verse. We're going to get a little bit in this Despicable guy, worse than that cartoon character Despicable Me. Antiochus the Fourth is very despicable. Mark Williams, would you mind just reading verse 21? You take one verse, yeah.
A despicable person will rise in his place, but they will not confer the royal majesty upon him. He will come when the kingdom is at ease and seize it through smooth, slippery top.
Okay, so another ruler is growing, but he doesn't have quite the military power, but he's got the conniving political power. It's smooth, slippery talk. Rosie, take verse 22.
A powerful force will be overpowered by him and broken together with the leader of the covenant.
Okay, so leader of the covenant is the high priest. And he's going to get involved in this time period of fighting for the king of Syria, Antiochus IV, and that alliance of political things is able to overcome military might. Bill, you want to take verse 23 for me?
After alliance is made with the leader of the covenant, the despicable person will act deceitfully. You will rise up and become powerful with a small nation.
All right, the despicable king, Antiochus IV, has an alliance with the high priest, but it's full of deceit. Christine, would you take verse 24?
He will come to the richest part of the province with it at ease. He will do what his fathers and his fathers' fathers did not do. He will distribute plunder and property to them. He will come up with plans against strongholds, but only for a time.
Okay, come into the richest places, and the richest places even of the beautiful land would be Jerusalem, and where the temple is, where that riches is. And he's got a lot of deceit, making promises, but he's ready to turn on them. Let me just read my notes there on the right, so they're down for us as well. The leader of the covenant is the high priest. Israel's divided between those who wanted Seleucid support and those who accommodated the Greeks, Hellenizers. And then there was a third group who resisted compromise. All of these details, if you want to dig into it further, are in the books 1st and 2nd Maccabees. That's actually parts of the intertestamental period, or the period between the New and Old Testament. We would refer to it as the Apocrypha. The Roman Catholic Church includes the Apocrypha in its dogma, but it has a lot of history, but it is not inspired, right? It's not inspired by God like our Old and New Testament is, but valuable history-wise. And I'm looking at the timing here, and I'm maybe going to just pause here, stop at verse 25 for the day, and wrap it up before we get to the most despicable thing. Just whetting your appetites. Antiochus IV is the one who overthrows Jerusalem, and with the help of the high priest, corrupts the high priest, offers a pig regularly as a sacrifice to Zeus on the temple altar in Jerusalem. So he's just totally corrupting the high priest of Israel, and then also corrupting the temple. He's going to actually be a very much an Old Testament type of the New Testament Antichrist. And so all this is going on again. Why? The people of that time needed to know God's in control, even though not only political stuff going on, but church problems going on. God's still in control. The Christ is going to come. Any political fighting going on today that Christians can get caught in the middle of? You laugh, right? Obviously, yeah, we don't have to go into it all, but all of those things you can think of, that political problems and the infighting and the back and forth, and you say Christians can get caught in the middle. God's got it. God's in control. God's protecting his people. And when there's scandals in the church, when there's money scandals, sex scandals, when whatever scandal it is in the church that distracts from the message, I predicted this is going to happen. This is all part of what's leading up to the end of the world. God says, I'm still in control. So just as Daniel's prophecy is fulfilled, the Savior comes, God's prophecy to us about his control until the end of time, it's in place. And so whether he comes tomorrow and you're still on the earth, God's got this. Whether you're in the grave 100 years from now and God comes, God's still got it. He's in control. Any other comments, questions as we wrap things up for today? We pray. Dear God, bless us through the study of your word, that specific details of the prophecy boggle our minds, and we don't understand it all, but help us recognize the simple truth, Lord, that you are in control and that your love protects us and you will see us through to our eternity with you. Amen. Yes.
I took a lot of history and knowledge, and I had a world history